Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is Many a True Nerd, and welcome back to my reaction to Fallout 4 at E3 2015. So obviously I've now had a good chance to kind of go through all of the footage a couple of times and kind of get some thoughts together on the whole thing. Obviously, I'm not going to give you an exact blow-by-blow account of my reaction to all of it, because there's a lot of it to which my reaction is basically very simply, I really like some of the stuff they've done. Obviously, I'm thrilled to see that it's not just a male-only character, that female-only characters are represented. I particularly like the new VAT system. I think that looks very, very cool indeed. It never really made perfect sense to me that, you know, the world could just be frozen by VATs. I mean, it was a nice throwback to the turn-based game of the old games, but I think it makes more sense that it slows the world down. I think that's lovely. I like the new dog companion and how that kind of operates, and particularly kind of the hint during the trailer that kind of the dog can be used to kind of bring enemies down. So rather than being just like a massive powerhouse like companions were in the old games, potentially the dog will be more of a support character. So, you know, used for kind of hamstringing and bringing down a particular enemy that you want to kind of not close distance to, stuff like that. There's an awful lot there I feel very excited about, very positive about. But I don't want to go over all of that. What I want to go over instead is 10 things that I think we can reasonably deduce from what we have seen during the footage. So stuff that wasn't kind of like overtly stated or announced, but based on what we've seen, we can now kind of start to piece together. So stuff that might not be quite so obvious. So the first thing I want to touch upon is tone, and this was obviously one of the questions I brought up in my Big Questions for E3 video, and I think based on something that that Todd Howard said during the presentation, we can actually kind of put this one to bed slightly. So obviously one of the things he pointed out was that the development cycle of Fallout 4 began pretty much immediately after Fallout 3, i.e. this all was started being planned out before Fallout New Vegas happened. Now, that suggests to me, therefore, that we can draw a pretty confident conclusion that tonally, and potentially in a few other ways, Fallout 4 is going to be very similar to Fallout 3. And honestly, like, from what we've seen in the trailer, that all matches up pretty clearly. Like, one of the big things about Fallout 3 was more about wandering these desolate, lonely wastes. And from the concept art that we've seen, and from kind of the collage of shots that are supposedly from the early games soon after you've left the vault, it looks like our protagonist is going to be wandering the waste through this kind of going on a very long journey before you get to Boston. So it's not about kind of bouncing between these factions and communities like you would have done in Fallout New Vegas. It's much more about this long journey across the wastes. But equally, again, just like Fallout 3, you've got that kind of desolate, lonely tone, but you've got it interspersed with kind of these moments of almost kind of a bit surreal comedy, quite frankly. So obviously we had the moment of the protagonist in the dress just for a second at the end, and the teddy bear helmet thing. And I think you can possibly maybe compare some of those to, say, in Fallout 3, quests like the Superhuman Gambit and Stealing Independence. These moments of quite surreal and sometimes slightly dark comedy in a very bleak environment. I think that's the kind of the tone that we should be expecting as a result. Now that, to my mind, is the good news. The Fallout 3 tone, that kind of very dark, bleak tone, was a very atmospheric game, and I've said all along that in terms of atmosphere, I think Fallout 3 is a better game than Fallout New Vegas. Unfortunately, there's a downside to that, if I'm reading that correctly, and that is, as some of you are aware, and I know this is, I think this is the minority position. My preferred game is Fallout New Vegas, not Fallout 3. I think Fallout New Vegas is my preferred game, and I think that's because of the faction system. And I think, based on what we've seen and based on what Todd Howard has said, at this point I'm almost kind of writing off that we're not likely to see a New Vegas style faction system. I mean, it's interesting obviously that New Vegas wasn't mentioned once at any point. This game clearly began development before New Vegas existed. Nobody kind of mentioned or name-checked New Vegas. I think it's safe to say that ideas that were introduced by New Vegas we have absolutely no reason to believe that those are going to be sticking around in Fallout 4, so the faction system is going to be dropping back out again, and therefore the story focus, and Todd Howard did specify that he was looking for more of a story focus, is coming back in. And I think that story focus in the sense of Fallout 3 and what's likely to be in Fallout 4 means that we are going to be told unfortunately, who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and who we're working with and who we're not. And we're not necessarily going to get much of a choice in that. Obviously, we might get some level of choice. I mean, the thing to remember about Fallout 3 is at the end of Broken Steel, we did get some level of choices, but it was quite superficial. In the base game of Fallout 3, you know, you were told who the damn good guys were and who the damn bad guys were, and you flipping worked with it. A couple of kind of small amoral factions, like the Slavers of Paradise Falls, you could choose to work with or not, but the core storyline was quite prescriptive. And unfortunately, and I personally do not think this is a good thing, I suspect as a result of what we've heard, that will be back. So moving on to the second point, and this is combat. Another very interesting thing that Todd Howard did point out was that he was saying that from day one of development, they'd been working hard on the combat piece. Now that's interesting. That's very, very interesting to me, because obviously that suggests that there's going to be quite a strong focus on guns and on armour, and that completely matches up with what we've seen in the footage, that there's a huge amount of customization and kind of therefore presumably a huge amount of balance work and thought has gone into the guns and building the guns, and the same applies to armour now that the armour is layered in kind of separate parts that you can build and improve and do so forth to individual parts too. And that suggests to me that the complexity of the game has shifted towards guns and armour, and potentially, as I was discussing yesterday, I think potentially there's a possibility that skill points have dropped out of the game entirely, therefore there's less focus on your character as a very complex, as kind of a very complex entity with lots of stats, and instead the complexity has moved to your guns. Now, that's kind of interesting because that leads me to the conclusion that Fallout 3 is going to be very combat focused, and therefore is going to have less workarounds where you can use skills to work around things. Now that kind of makes sense because again, like we were saying earlier, Fallout 4 has clearly been seen as this spiritual successor to Fallout 3, and Fallout 3, as you may recall, did not have much in the way of workarounds. Your non-combat skills generally, aside from their like specific use like lockpick for unlocking things, did not really give you a way around things. It was New Vegas that was really good at kind of saying that you could use skill checks to find pacifist solutions to problems. A pacifist run of Fallout 3 is effectively just tanking. It's you running from point A to point B and spamming stimpaks and hoping you don't die. A pacifist run of New Vegas is much more interesting because the game actually finds interesting ways for you to use your skills. I mean, the number of speech checks in Fallout New Vegas versus Fallout 3 is completely night and day. So if that's true, again, that's actually something that worries me a little bit. I mean, one thing that was stressed repeatedly was Todd Howard did say that player freedom remains our absolute #1 goal, but equally kind of when he clarified that and spoke about it again later in the post-showcase interview, I think it was made pretty clear he was talking about the fact he wanted an open world where quests didn't lock you into an area. You could always have all quests on the go and wander wherever you wanted, rather than in the sense of you can build your character into whatever you want. So, sorry to start off with two that worry me a little bit, but I do think from what we've seen we might be looking at a slightly more restrictive and combat-heavy game, which would make sense if this is truly the spiritual successor of Fallout 3 and has thrown a lot of what Fallout New Vegas did under the bus. Number 3, Special. This has had some very major changes. Some of you will be aware of this, but I just thought I'd quickly go over it because it was skimmed through really fast during the video. So for those of you who don't know, they've slightly changed what all the special stats do. The first thing they do, and I think this is something that people realised less, was when we saw the special stats being set up, all the special stats started being, they were defaulted to 1 out of 10, and only 21 points were available, meaning if you wanted to set like the average character where all your stats were the same, you'd get to 4 out of 10. And you may recall in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, you could have all your stats at 5 out of 10 and have some spare special points left over. So you've got far fewer special points to play with, which is very, very interesting and suggests to me that we're looking at characters that are going to be less generalist and more forced to specialise, and potentially that suck more in areas where they aren't specialising, which is something I really, really approve of. In terms of what the changes are to each of the unique special attributes. Again, working under the theory potentially that skill points have had something done to change them, and therefore that special might play a bigger role in building your character. Strength now seems to be directly impacting damage increase or decrease with all melee weapons, and presumably unarmed too. I know unarmed used to be rolled up under endurance, but it didn't say that under the new under the new system. Perception affects accuracy while you're in the new slow-mo VATS. Endurance is obviously still your health, but now is for sprinting as well. Sprinting is confirmed. That I love. I did ask for more mobility in sprinting in my 30 Things I Wanted to See video, so I'm thrilled to see that in. Charisma seems to be, again, for speech checks, but also seems to be effectively a kind of a built-in barter check as well, because it was saying it affected prices. Intelligence has shifted to effectively almost act like the Swift Learner perk. The higher your intelligence, the more experience points you get for doing something, not skill points anymore, which suggests that, that effectively you'll end up at a higher level if you take higher intelligence for doing the same number of things, which if potentially your character is now going to be built more around perks and you still get only one perk per level, potentially therefore higher intelligence could still be very, very useful because you'll be able to have more perks than characters with low intelligence, so that's rather interesting. Agility is meanwhile used for how good you are at sneaking, and luck is used rather bafflingly for how quickly your critical bar, which you build up by being in violence and then choose to empty by giving yourself a guaranteed critical strike when you want, and then it charges up faster again once you've used it. But that's really kind of weird, because that means if you've got high luck, criticals aren't anything to do with luck anymore. It's just when you've freely chosen to use your critical, which wasn't lucky, it was when you chose to push the button, it comes back quicker again. So luck defines nothing to do with luck. I don't know, that's kind of weird to me, but that is apparently how it works now. Number 4, degradation appears to have completely dropped out of the game. Now, I personally do not mind this. I mean, I didn't mind maintaining my weapons in Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, but neither did I ever once kind of think, oh my goodness, I'm having such a good time because I have to go and repair my weapons right now. So I don't know if we look at some of the kind of the screenshots of both the weapons and indeed your just your standard armor in your Pip-Boy, you'll notice that the condition meter appears to be completely gone. So yeah, weapons don't appear to have condition anymore, which is very, very interesting, which would suggest that repair is no longer a skill. Even if skills do exist, repair is presumably not a skill anymore because there's nothing to repair anymore. But as someone also interestingly pointed out, we briefly saw a flash of a Vault Boy little kind of bobblehead container thing, which did have on its space for 7 special Vault Boys and 13 skill Vault Boys. So if repair's still there, I'm not sure what the repair bobblehead's gonna do if you don't repair your armor or your flipping guns anymore. The one thing maybe it could be used for, because there's one exception to this rule, is when we saw the power armor being worked on, because you can obviously also work on your power armor now and kind of upgrade it and change it, individual parts of it is. We did see that appeared to have health, and repair was an option at the bottom of that. So if the repair skill does exist, it is possibly exclusively for maintaining your power armor at this point, which, depending on what a crucial part of the game the power armor is, could actually still make it incredibly useful, even if you don't have to repair guns anymore. So yeah, that's interesting. It would appear that there's no degradation, with the exception of your power armor, which does need to be repaired and kept running. So that's certainly an interesting kind of fairly major shift. Moving on to point number 5, it would appear that the mechanics for taking damage have changed quite significantly, and I don't really know how this affects yet. Because when I first kind of saw the footage, I thought, oh good, damage resistance is back, which makes sense because damage resistance was what was in Fallout 3, and Fallout 4 and 3 appear to be very close together. Yet, the damage resistance, however it's being calculated now, it ain't how it was being calculated in Fallout 3. Because we were seeing that the damage resistance on, I think it was just a single part of the power armor, is 200. Some of you may recall that damage resistance used to be a percentage reduction of damage. So if you had 50 damage resistance, that meant that the damage that you took was 50% of what it would have been otherwise. So obviously you can't have a damage resistance of 200, because that means you'd have 200% damage reduction, meaning not only would you not take damage from any attack, but presumably whatever was thrown at you would also bounce back and kill your enemies, which I'm going to guess is not actually the case. Excluding the power armor itself, we also saw in a brief snapshot of the Pip-Boy that was shown off by Todd Howard. We saw a character that was level 48, and obviously worth noting therefore that the level cap appears to be significantly higher than either 20 or 30, which is nice. A physical damage resistance of 110. So I don't know what exactly this refers to, but it does appear to be that the damage resistance is back, but it's being calculated in a completely different way to what it was in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, so sorry I couldn't figure out what it was. Also worth noting that it looks like there's a separate physical damage resistance to energy weapons damage resistance. And the difference appears to be at a glance that power armor is more resistant to normal bullets but weaker to energy weapons, whereas like clothing, because I'm pretty sure we saw when we saw the leather armor right at the beginning, it looked like it had a higher resistance to energy weapons but lower to bullets. So I think that's how that works out, which kind of makes sense, because if you remember the power armor in New Vegas and Fallout 3 was weak to kind of certain special energy weapons, so it kind of makes sense that energy weapons would be more effective against power armor, whereas just normal bullets would be more effective against squishy flesh underneath cloth. Moving on to point number 6, kill everything. Now, we didn't get confirmation on this, obviously, but one thing that was said when Todd Howard was discussing conversations, the new system of conversations, was that you can go through conversation trees with people, but he said that also you could walk away from the conversation at any time, or, and I quote him, you can shoot them in the face if you want to. Now, well, the bare minimum, ladies and gentlemen, that is a step forward from Skyrim, because don't bother trying to stab anyone in the face in Skyrim, because 90% chance they'll have a flipping essential tag on them. So that at least suggests that, you know, we will be able to, if we want to shoot people. Whether the Essentials tag will still be making very regular appearances in plot-critical areas, obviously we do not know yet, but at the bare minimum I take some solace from what was said there, that it sounds like we will be able to have some freedom to commit violence against characters if we choose to, so that'll be nice. Number 7, going back to the dress that I mentioned earlier. Obviously it is fabulous, that you can be fabulous in the Boston wasteland. That is just fantastic news on itself. But actually, the thing that I'm more interested in there is, obviously, because you've got a male character wearing female gear there, it means we've got rid of that bloody awful system from Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, where gear was... there was a single piece of gear, but it just changed depending on what gender your character was, which was really, really annoying. So, not, you know, I actually think it's quite nice that any character can wear anything, and if you want to cross-dress, if that's your thing and you want to do it, great, more power to you, whatever, doesn't hurt anyone, you go for it. But actually what I'm more excited by is the thing that most annoyed me about New Vegas was regularly the fact that female characters could not get a flipping tuxedo for love nor money, because you'd kill gamblers to try and get their fancy gambler suits, and oh no, in the few seconds between stripping it off their cold dead body and putting it on yourself, it turned into a horrendous yellow dress with an awful pattern on it. So I'm thrilled that I will actually be able to have a female character wearing a nice tuxedo at some point. That's pretty much what I'm up there for, so yes, that's exciting. Number 8, just a quick flash of an enemy that we saw in the little montage at the end of the presentation, which is we did see a couple of synths. So that kind of suggests that we were pretty spot on with suggesting in the things to watch out for in E3 video that the question of robots and the Institute and the Railroad will be coming back, at the bare minimum, as a subplot in Fallout 4. So we definitely do have robots in attendance in synth form. They look pretty tough. It looked like one of them took a couple of shotgun blasts to the head and seemed to be able to shrug that off. So yeah, definitely not the easiest enemies in the world, so it'll be very interesting to see where that plot goes. Number 9, and it would quite frankly be remiss of me if I did not at least mention the jetpack. Yes, the jetpack is a thing. It's very, very interesting. Although I think actually it's kind of wrong to call it a jetpack. I'd say in a game where like there's clearly aerial transport and you can move around in vertibirds and in massive blimps, I would say it's, to me, it strikes me as very likely that it's not actually a jetpack. It's basically a way that you can jump out of something that's in flight. either an airship or a vertibird, and basically just do a controlled descent. I think it's more of just a hover and controlled descent. I would be very surprised if from the ground you could use that to move upwards, because I think it should be very clear, we didn't actually see that at all. When we saw the jetpack, we saw a character starting out from mysteriously high, and I'm guessing having just jumped out of some sort of aircraft, hovering for a second to take out an enemy on the roof, and then basically just slowing their descent in a controlled descent down onto the street. We did not see them then using the jetpack to fly back up again. So I don't really think jetpack's the right term. I think it's just a way of controlling your descent down. That's still really badass, by the way, but I think it's kind of, we probably need to temper expectations slightly. I don't think we're going to be just kind of, standing out into the waves and then just blasting up and away. I think it's not going to be like that at all. I think it's just a mechanism for allowing the character to get down out of an aerial transport to the ground safely. And finally, number 10, I just quickly wanted to touch upon the setting, because in the post-showcase interview, Todd Howard was answering questions about why Boston. And obviously, we've touched already that there was history about mentioning Boston and the Institute in Fallout 3. But the interesting answer that he gave was that it was, he thought that kind of area of New England was particularly interesting because of its blend of history and high-tech stuff, was his answer. And I think that's very, very cool, because I think that should actually tell us that actually the history of the Boston area will probably be showing up in some capacity or another. I mean, Fallout 3 did that. Of course, we all remember the quest, Stealing Independence, which is one of my personal favourite quests. I love that quest. It's so funny. So do not be surprised at all in Fallout 4 if we have to slap in the rebreather and head down into the harbour chasing some pre-war tea or something not wholly unlike that. So there we are, ladies and gentlemen, just 10 quick observations there that I made out of the E3 presentation. Actually, I'm listening back to myself. I realise I do sound a little bit negative on it. I don't mean to be, I'm sorry. The lots of stuff that I think kind of in the core gameplay, like I touched on the beginning, like the VATS, the weapon customization, the armor customization. There's a huge amount actually that I specifically asked for in my 30 things video that has actually come to pass. So for example, like the customizable player bases, the customizable weapons, the customizable armors, even the return of the Thorn by the looks of it, because we did get a quick glance at what looked like a great big arena, which is very, very cool. And hopefully improvements to companions, because personally, I'm speculating at the moment that the dog might be with us for the entire game, because it does look like, as a plot point, we're picking him up very early and he'll be with us for the whole game. So it's possible we might make it through the whole game with just the dog and no human companions. And if so, then they might have fixed companions by virtue of the fact companions aren't going to be massive drug-wielding badasses anymore. It's going to be the dog that's going to support you, not be the main killing machine like Boone was. So all of that's great, and all of that is specifically answering things I'm very excited by. But I do think there's kind of a couple of things that, if I'm right in how I'm reading this, I'm going to be sad about. Because it sounds like this is very much going to be the son of Fallout 3, and any lessons and improvements that were made in Fallout New Vegas aren't really going to get a look in. I really hope I'm proved wrong. I really hope I'm proved wrong, and that factions as a system are back, and that there is a branching plot that you can kind of choose your own way through, and you can choose your own destiny through it, and you can make your own mind up for who the good and the bad guys are. Because if there's one thing that annoys me about Fallout 3, it's the game mawkishly telling you, good guys over there, bad guys over there, you're with the good guys, by the way. Don't like it, don't like that at all. So I really hope that doesn't come back, but it's really much too early for us to comment with any certainty at all. But lots to be excited about, and equally lots to keep an eye on yet. But there you are, ladies and gentlemen. This will probably be my last video on Fallout 4 for the moment, until there's kind of a big new reveal of information. So until we get something new out, that will probably be the end of that. Fallout New Vegas, You Only Live Once, returns this weekend. I think my voice is feeling much better. I think I still sound a tiny bit croaky at the moment, but I think it's feeling much improved. So that will return this weekend, and there will be plenty more Fallout to keep you all entertained while we await the arrival of Fallout 4 at the very exciting date of November the 10th. Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Look, waiting for launch day already. I'm going to be covering the hell out of that during launch week. It's going to be magnificent. But yes, there we are, ladies and gentlemen. In the meantime, I've been John, and this has been Many a True Nerd, and this has been my look at Fallout 4 at E3. Thank you very much, and goodbye.